South Florida, the Mumma College of Business, my collaborator in the Doctorate of Business Administration program, and the academic director of that program. Grandon Gill is professor of Information Systems and Decision Sciences and the academic director of the Doctorate of Business Administration program at the Mumma College of Business at the University of South Florida. Unfortunately, his undergraduate MBA and DBA degrees are all from Harvard Business School. He is a leading researcher in the transdisciplinary field of informing science and editor-in-chief of Informing Science, the International Journal of Emerging Transdiscipline. He's internationally known for his research in the development and use of case studies, and is currently working on a grant with the National Science Foundation in the U.S. to develop discussion case studies relating to cybersecurity. He also has an amazing NSF grant to work with the development of case study and the application of case studies in universities in South Africa, which I don't think is in here.
That actually is not an NSF grant. That's a Fulbright, but it's the right idea.
Fulbright, yeah.
This thing has recognized this disk drive like 7 times. This is not a good sign.
His principal research areas are the impact of complexity on decision making and IS education. And he has published many articles describing how technology and innovative pedagogies can be combined to increase the effectiveness of teaching across a broad range of IS topics. His most recent book, Informing Business, Research and Education on a Rugged Landscape, deals with how we might better align business academia with the complexity of business practice. He also has extensive experience in the case method research, as well as in writing cases for classroom use, facilitating case discussions. His MBA and DBA are both from Harvard Business School. Why is that in there twice? With the fact that he's the author of the book Informing with the Case Method, Informing Science Press, and recently became the founding editor of the Journal of Information Technology Education Discussion Cases, and is also the founding editor of the Mumma Business Review at the USF Mumma College of Business, which is kicking off this spring.
Well, my name's Grandon Gill, in case you haven't picked that up yet, and this particular presentation is Educational Innovation, Bridging Academic Research and Practice via Interdisciplinary Business Doctorate for Executives. My title had been the DBA program, but Najib wanted something a little bit more sophisticated, and what I'm going to be talking today about is the DBA program that we launched at the University of South Florida. This is kind of a continuation of a presentation that I did about a year ago. And my presentation will be followed by a presentation from Matt, for which he will have a good 27 seconds to do by the time I'm through. And then where he'll actually introduce some of our participants. So let's see. Okay, so overview of the presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about how a DBA differs from a PhD program. And then I'm going to talk about the disciplinary, or rather the interdisciplinary design of our program. And then I will talk about some of our intended educational outcomes, both from a qualitative standpoint and the results of a very short survey that I did. Finally, I will give you the informing science perspective in terms of where we see this program going as part of a broader initiative within our College of Business. So, question 1, what is an executive doctorate? And if you take a look at an executive DBA versus an academic PhD, there are a number of ways in which they're similar and a number of ways in which they're different. And this is the balancing slide, but you can't actually see the, I don't know what happened to the laser here, but at any rate, was that my laser? Well, at any rate, from a disciplinary perspective, one of the things that we see here is that okay, why isn't that coming up? What'd you say? Well, no, it's not. I'm actually not. There's supposed to be some animations on this slide. Apparently, it doesn't much like that either. Or else, oh, wait, maybe it's, I have to be. Okay, it turns out I have to have the mouse on the thing. Research approach. Our traditional business PhDs are disciplinary. In fact, they're getting narrower and narrower in terms of the expected focus of the program. Our DBA program, on the other hand, is interdisciplinary, which is to say that we specifically avoid a disciplinary focus because, as you will see, we are problem-focused as opposed to being publication-focused. And that's the second dimension, our criteria for success. If all of our PhDs could come out publishing in the top tier and premier journals, we would be the happiest PhD program in the world. Doesn't matter what it's used for. If we could just publish in those journals, that would be spectacular. The DBA program has a very different objective. We want our participants to be able to apply research methods to business problems and actually solve them. And that helps explain the interdisciplinary focus, because you don't have to have something as complex as e-health across borders to have to use interdisciplinary approaches in order to solve actual problems. Business problems don't come nicely compartmentalized. Finally, we have the academic goal. And in the case of a PhD program, virtually everyone wants to become a full-time researcher / academic, whereas in the DBA program, a lot of them are interested maybe in teaching somewhat, but they don't envision teaching as being a primary career. Now, there are some exceptions to that, people who want to who want to sort of transfer out of business to academia, but the vast majority are interested in participating in the academic endeavor, but not full-time. So, how does disciplinarity apply to these programs? And what I would argue is that there's a whole variety of different executive DBA programs that are out there, and they have fundamentally different structures, so it's worth just talking briefly about what some of these structures are. And I would say there are 4 design philosophies. Virtually all of these programs begin with a core set of research methods courses, because make no doubt about it, a DBA differs from an MBA in that the MBA is basically trying to teach you business. The DBA is trying to teach you research methods that could be applied to business. I would not have the arrogance to attempt to teach the folks in our DBA program business because it would quickly demonstrate how much less I know about business than they do. Those who can't teach, and those who can't teach research. So at any rate, that last one's one of mine. So there are different organizations. Now, the European approach to a lot of these programs basically gives the students a little bit of instruction in research methods and then says, okay, time to write a dissertation. And you find some advisors, you write the dissertation, there's not a lot of coursework, and a lot of the DBA programs that are based in places like Europe and Australia follow this model. It's basically, and if your dissertation isn't good enough, well, that's that. It's basically a doctorate by publication. Now, there's another type of model, the disciplinary executive doctorate, which looks a lot like a PhD and includes a lot more courses that specifically deal with research in a specific discipline. And the idea is you will then produce a disciplinary doctorate. And there are a couple of programs like that that have emerged in the US over the past 5 years. Now, another type of program is what I call the multidisciplinary program. And in the multidisciplinary program, what happens is if you look at the courses, it looks like an MBA curriculum, except there's research appended that preceding each title. So it's research in finance, research in accounting, research in marketing. And so you get a separate research course in each of the disciplines, but there's no effort to integrate these together. And in many respects, that's easiest for the faculty. It's easiest to organize that type of program because the faculty already teach research in their particular discipline within their Ph.D. program, so all they have to do is wander over into the DBA and teach the same course. Then there are finally the truly interdisciplinary programs where the courses don't fit into a specific area. They overlap. Their titles are messy. Their titles are confusing. And one of the challenges of these types of programs is we don't have a lot of faculty members who are used to teaching in a very interdisciplinary fashion, and the type of thing that you do when you talk about teaching is different interdisciplinary. It's much more like facilitation than sort of traditional instruction. So here's an example of what I call a disciplinary structure. This is the executive doctorate at Oklahoma State University. And what you'll notice is you've got a whole bunch of research methods courses, but then you've got concentration courses which allow you to focus on the research in a specific discipline. Maybe not as many as their PhD program, but nevertheless, they're looking for disciplinary output, which, by the way, might make them attractive to universities, which tend to hire on a departmental basis, and on a departmental basis, they're going to look and say, okay, well, you know, what research have you done in our area? Now, another example of a program is the recent program that was launched at the University of Florida. They were launched about 6 months before we were, and if you take a look at this particular program, what you'll notice is you've got finance, entrepreneurship, international business, marketing, organizational behavior, strategic management, supply chain strategy. These are all courses that you would find in a normal MBA program. The difference is they focus on research in these areas as opposed to just conveying content. As I mentioned, this is the type of program that is probably easiest for faculty to do because they can basically teach the same subject that they teach in their regular PhD program. They just might not cover as much. Now, if you take a look at our program, well, first off, it's a lot more colorful than the other program in this presentation. I think that's very important. You know, it may not be aesthetic, but it's got lots of colors and things going on, and you can't make head or tail of it. Welcome to the world of interdisciplinary. So, in the case of our program, the courses in sort of this off-white are all research methods courses. The courses in green are cross-cutting courses that represent strategic areas of interest for our college. So creativity and innovation, analytics, sustainability and ethics, strategic analysis, these are all areas that our college considers important, but they don't necessarily fit nicely into a discipline. In fact, they don't fit nicely into a discipline. Then we've got some special topics courses, which we plan to swap in and out of the curriculum. One of them now is Informing Science, which is my course, an interdisciplinary course. And then another one is coming up in this fall, and I think it's going to be sort of an organizational psychology course being taught by someone outside the College of Business, assuming I can get him. Then we have these publication courses, and the publication courses are actually courses where participants are required to write pieces that could potentially be submitted for publication. We don't necessarily require them to submit them for publication, but what we're looking for is to give them some practice before the dissertation phase to do something that looks like it would be publishable. And our first publication course occurred last spring after I did this presentation. It was so successful in terms of the output. We were so impressed. Everybody was writing case studies that the dean said, okay, we got to launch a journal. And I'll say, okay, well, launch the Mumma case review. We're the Mumma College of Business. Then the dean said, yeah, but I want an article, I want a journal for practitioners. Okay, we'll also launch the Mumma Business Review. So now we're actually in the process of launching 2 journals as a way of providing our DBA students outlets for the work that they're doing that can be shared. But we also want to bring in folks from all the other DBA programs, because every DBA program is having a problem because it's very hard to publish interdisciplinary type of work in the traditional academic journals, because the tendency is for these journals to get narrower and narrower in their focus as opposed to being broader and broader. And we're hoping to basically provide an important service to the DBA community and to practice with these journals. Now, we also have dissertation courses, and we've got a wide variety of dissertation options. And these purple courses are issues courses. And what's different about them is that the DBA students themselves play a major role in selecting what these courses are. We have faculty make proposals. We have the DBA students request specific courses so that we can essentially include them in the decision process. And these are done a little thinner here, not because I was short of space, but because they're 2-credit workshop courses. They're designed not to have substantial outside course load because we do not want them interfering with the dissertation process, but we do want to keep the cohort together, and I'll get around to why that's so important shortly. So, what are the intended educational outcomes of this? And I'll go through this next thing fairly quickly. I would argue an interesting way of looking at educational programs is whether, first off, whether they're externally certified. Do you have somebody who is actually in charge of saying whether you've completed the program, or whether they're self-certified? Does the participant himself or herself decide whether or not they're done? Another interesting dimension is whether the content is mainly standardized or whether it's highly customized to the individual. Well, we can find examples in each one of these quadrants. For example, a K-12 school tends to be externally certified, which is to say the students don't graduate until the teachers think they're ready, and they have a very, very tightly controlled content. I mean, in our county, you can't just do any course. It's a very standardized program. Now, if we go over to the next quadrant, you can think of this as continuing education. You know, nobody requires you to take courses in creative writing, and you take as many courses as you want until you either decide you're not going to be a creative writer or until you've decided they're no longer fun. So this is a case where basically the student is in charge. If you take a look at the highly customized self-certified, that describes most tutorial issues. When you go to take piano lessons, for example, you get a customized program and you decide when it's time to stop taking lessons. I call this the client region because this is also the way most client relationships go. You work, with the professional until you decide the professional has given you enough. You're not looking for the professional to certify you. Then finally, there is the highly customized program that's externally certified, and I would call the Ph.D. programs falling under this. Because each person's Ph.D. experience is different, but you don't get certified until your mentor tells you, you're ready and you go through your exams. Now, this is a classic apprenticeship. I could have called this, instead of the replica quadrant, I could have called it the guild quadrant, because the participants want to become exactly like you. So if you're running a Ph.D. program, your participants want to become professors like you. They want to mimic you, just like if you were a blacksmith. Now, what I would argue is our program doesn't fit into any of those. What we are in is a partner quadrant. Our participants have a lot more input into the way the program goes because, well, at least in this first couple of cohorts, we don't know what the hell we're doing. So, that's That's a good reason to involve folks. You know, we're trying to help them learn stuff that will be useful for their problem solving. And since we don't fully understand their problems, we really need a partnership relationship. And that's why at the end of the program, we allow the participants to help us select the courses. Because, you know, they know what they need better than we do. So, basically, the difference between a partner region and the other region is the partners help drive the problems that they're going to address. They help determine what it's appropriate. They don't need to publish in top-tier journals. They've got to decide how they want to disseminate this that makes sense to them. We get them to help determine late-stage courses. They help determine what form their dissertation will be in, most useful. Other programs have expressed extreme envy at the fact that we managed to get in our course catalog 5 different things that would satisfy our dissertation requirements. And that gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of trying to meet the needs of our partners. And I try never to use the term students with the DBAs. I refer to participants because really this is a partnership. So now in the yield, just as a sort of an outcome measure, the 2017 cohort, we started out having accepted 36 and 26 joined the program. We lost 1 in the first week, and then we lost 1 for totally external reasons, so we're now 24 in that cohort. In the 2018 cohort, a number of whom are sitting around here, we accepted 40 because the dean said he'd like to end up at around 30, and we figured we lost 10 last time, so we'll lose at least 10 this time. 38 of them joined the program, and I think now we're at 37, 36 or 37, somewhere in there. We've actually had someone join the program subsequently to the start. Thank you, Maria, for bringing your husband into the program. He was actually accepted in the fall, but we won't go into that. So at any rate, we've now, and if you take a look at the profiles of these students, Matt will give you a brief overview of that, but it's a very, very impressive group. Now, one of the things I did at the end of the first year was I conducted a survey of the first cohort, basically asking them a simple question. Has what you've learned in the DBA impacted your business? Well, here's the precise question. How much impact has participating in the DBA this past year had on your business or employer? And what we see here is about 10% said very little, 10% said, somewhat little, 20% said, I guess more than a little. I don't know what that middle one is. But 13 out of the 21 people who responded basically indicated that the program has already had an impact on the business. And we're hearing stories like this all the time. There was also a qualitative section where they actually explained what that impact was. And we got some very interesting stories out of that. But I didn't ask them if I could share them, so they're not in this presentation. What I thought was particularly interesting is now they've had a year of the program, so that they have a pretty good idea what the program is. It wasn't, they just didn't get taken in by our seductive marketing materials. And so how much impact do you expect participating in the DBA program will have on your business or employer in the future? And everybody answered at least 3 out of 5, and more than half felt that participating in this program, what they were going to learn was going to have a big impact on them. Now, we could argue that this is the narrative fallacy, which we tell them about, which is to say you basically explain things in terms of where you are so it makes sense. And there may be a little bit of that there, but nevertheless, I consider this a very, very positive sign because it suggests that what we are doing in our interdisciplinary approach actually has some relevance to them. Okay, so let's think about this in a broader context, and this is slides I brought in from a paper that Matt and I and our dean and one other fellow actually are going to be presenting in Lithuania in June at the Informing Science Conference. And the idea is that if you look at a business school or any institution as an informing system, you have an institution in the center, and that institution can inform research directly, inform students directly, inform practice directly, and of course the arrows go in both directions. So there are 3 direct flows from the institution to external stakeholders: the research community, the student community, and the community of practice. And I could have added other communities, but if you do, then you have to do 3-dimensional drawing, and I'd never be able to get that. But these are the most important flows. Now, what we would argue is that, in fact, a university can do something very different as well. It can act as a venue through which other communities inform each other without the direct involvement of the university. So a university can help students inform practice and be informed by practice without necessarily having its own faculty involved. Students can inform research. Research can inform practice and be informed by practice. In addition, within each of these, you can have researchers informing each other. That's interdisciplinary research, where researchers are informing each other. We can stimulate students informing each other. We can stimulate practice informing each other. All of these are things that the university can potentially do by creating venues for informing. And what our argument was in that paper is that creation of venues for informing may have even greater impact than the direct informing paths that we always talk about. So the traditional business school kind of envisions itself, I call this the straw man business school, because no business school will admit to it, but many of them strive to achieve this, basically expects to have a direct flow to research, typically a one-way flow to students. We lecture our students, but we don't necessarily listen to them. And then I've been told over and over by researchers that our research gets out into practice because our students learn stuff from us and then they take it to the organizations that they work in. You'll notice I kind of grade that one out a little bit because I'm a little suspicious. But I think that's hope rather than evidence-based reasoning there. But this is a very narrow type of informing. But if you take a look at what the reward systems are in a lot of our school, this is exactly the type of thing that we're trying to do. The ideal informing business school basically supports all these informing paths between research, practice, and students, within research, within students, within practice. And we can make a lot of arguments why in a complex environment, this is a much more resilient, robust informing pattern than you would get with a traditional business school. Well, the DBA program basically supports all of these informing paths, and part of the way it does so is by moving together students and practice. Basically, since all of our students are executives, and anyone who's been in the program will tell you it is the communications between them over the weekend that really makes the program. Now all of a sudden what we've got is we've got some built-in stuff here that's some of the most difficult things to do. Also, the research and practice informing is defined as part of the program, because what are we teaching in these programs? We're helping the participants learn research methods. So the DBA program, I would say, is the most comprehensive fit of all of these programs that we have in the Mumma College, and there are a lot of very interesting things we're doing. It is probably the broadest fit to that model that we have.